if there was unreasonable stuff. So, I mean, I've definitely had situations where you can tell that a police officer claimed that they had a reasonable basis for stopping somebody, and then I got a report and said, hey, that doesn't seem reasonable. You can go before a judge and say, look, that, this requires a reasonable stop. The policeman didn't act reasonably here, therefore, this case should be dismissed because there's no evidence. And the judge will say, no, you're right, that was unreasonable.
If it turns into an arrest.
If it turns into an arrest, yeah. So there's just like, so I would just say from a criminal offense attorney standpoint, there's definitely checks and balances in place where if there is an unreasonable stop, if the policeman does act unreasonably with you, there's the means by which you can go and say, hey, this was unreasonable, and they'll be held accountable.
So this conversation is about community relations, and so here we have this context for community relations, and now what are we going to do with it?
Yeah. No, and I'm just saying, and so it obviously, I mean, yeah. But just, there is that other, the system itself puts some sort of pressure on the police department to have their own, the policeman doesn't have an incentive to make an unreasonable stop if they know it's unreasonable, because the judge will throw that out if it was unreasonable. So it does, it's open to interpretation. You do get problems that way, but I would just say that there's definitely, there's a way bound to counterbalance that. Instead of the police officer would have to stop somebody for no reason.
So, is there a response, Chief Butler, or?
I'll just make a comment on that, kind of along what I think you're going to say about things, Mike. I mean, you've got something like that. Police do need authority to do things, and I hate to say this, Jonathan and Raleigh and Mike, but I think the real problem is the legislature making everything in the world against the law.
That's right.
Not so much the police enforcing what they have to, but the fact that you guys have made everything a crime. And so you're sitting out there in your car and the cops talk to you. Why? Because it's a crime to sit around and peep on somebody. So I really say that I don't think it's so much community or even the law enforcement and police. It's the legislatures, city, local, state, even federal that have made everything against the law.
5 of them every time they get on legislation.
Well, it's definitely job security. Now, I think that's why we vote for lawmakers, and that's why we have these conversations, is to figure out what's the right way to do things, and to say that any of us have the exact right answer today is probably not only premature but unrealistic, and that's part of why we're having the conversation. I don't know, Chief Butler, if you have any other responses.
Well, that's a great question, and I have to say, as I listened to your scenario and as you described it, I didn't hear reasonable suspicion. I'm just telling you, in that particular case. Now, if there's more to it, maybe there's more from the officer's perspective than what you're saying, but from what you said, I didn't hear it. So, but I haven't heard the officer's perspective. But I will also tell you, I mean, we're here to try to juggle things in terms of the rights of the individuals versus the rights of community and society. And that is a tough balancing act. And that's not necessarily clean in a lot of different arenas. It can be messy in terms of what is that right balance. And law sometimes trying to help us with that. And when you have laws, how do the police respond to that, and how does the community respond to that? There's all those responsibilities out there, but that's in essence where we're at. This is a balancing act between your rights, and perhaps the officer was investigating a series of nighttime burglaries or things that were going on in that area in a car that looks similar to yours, with a person who looks similar to you. And so there's lots of people in that neighborhood who might be saying, I want an officer out here trying to stop this from happening. That's one part of the balancing act. And then the other part of the balancing act is yours. And so I get what you're saying, but it's not always clean.
Let me make a particular comment about that, because in this particular case, the officer was particularly impolite. And so what could have been a simple walk up and say, hi, how are you doing this evening? Why are you out here? So for instance, this person doesn't know that, maybe I just didn't get into a fight with my girlfriend. I'm out crying in the car. I mean, it could be anything. Instead, I was accused of stealing the car because I was sitting there. And so there's a certain attitude.
That's the loss of innocent until proven guilty?
Well, I don't think it was that severe. In this case, it was more a matter of simple courtesy. And so these are the kinds of things that you find some police officers are capable of interacting with community members in a polite and respectful manner, and some of them just assume some kind of authority or treat people in a rude manner that is unnecessary to do their work.
So I'll tell you, I had a similar experience a couple years ago. Actually. So I was driving back. Actually, I was at Boulder County Human Services doing my job as a child welfare worker on a Sunday, and so the parking lot is empty in Boulder, and I'm there with my wife, who thankfully lets me be a workaholic. And as I'm pulling out of my parking space, I see the lights come up behind me, and I'm going, well, I'm pretty sure I'm allowed to back out of my parking space, but let's let this one play out for a second. And I have an officer come up to me and he says, who are you? I said, well, I work here, and here's my ID, here's my work badge, and these are people I do joint investigations with as a child protection worker. And it was a very negative experience. I think certainly for me. I showed him everything. He said, well, all right, thanks, keep going. And he said, it's awfully suspicious that, somebody's here on a Sunday in an empty parking lot. And I show him my badge, and he goes, I have no idea what I'm looking at, sir. And I said, it's my badge. It says Boulder County Human Services on it, and this is a Boulder County Human Service building. Well, what do you do here? Well, I'm a child welfare worker. Well, what does a child welfare worker do? Well, we investigate child protection complaints against kids, and sometimes we actually use police officers for those situations. I never followed up with anybody, but I found out on Monday morning, the day following, that there was a reverse 911 call and there was a missing persons report in that neighborhood. There was definitely a reasonable reason to stop. The interaction was unreasonable, and certainly that's why part of the reason we're doing this, not because of my experience, because if those things can happen to someone who does joint investigations with workers and has that kind of an experience, what are some ways that we can have better experiences? And I know Stan's got to take off in a couple minutes. So.
If I can just make one quick point, I totally agree with Mike about your experience, which doesn't, from what you described, doesn't sound right. But I'll tell you, in my 33 years as a lawyer, I've tried 12 homicide cases. 2 of them in the last 3 years here in Boulder, very serious cases. In every one of those cases, that statute was used as a basis for police officers to make contacts that were essential to them developing the evidence that we needed to solve the case. So the issue is, it's about a balance. And of course, people need to be respectful and polite and everything else, but the police do need to have, and the Supreme Court said over and over, they do need to have the ability to make the kind of minimal contact that a terrorist stop involves. And when they do that, it helps us solve crime and keep the community safe. So it's about balance. And I could go into some experiences I've had like this as well through my now quite long life. But and it's very frustrating. But you need to give police the ability to do what they got to do to solve crime.
Last one.
Yeah, really quickly. And I think one of the issues that you're bringing up, and I don't think you dwelled on too much, was when this happened and I went in and had a discussion with whoever, it seemed to get blown off a little bit. And I think that's a responsibility we have to take in terms of, I don't know, again, I wasn't there and I don't know what happened, that's your perspective. But I think police departments, when those things, and we wonder if the balance is where it needs to be, we need to always self-modulate and correct and retrain and ensure that our officers are doing the right thing. So I think it's important for police departments to have the kind of the accessibility so people can come in and state their case and get heard. And so I think that's another part that we didn't talk about, but it's important.
I think your comment about having somebody who needs to walk the community is important in this context, because there are lots of police officers that we run into on grocery mall, for instance, perfectly nice people, they're friendly. In fact, the guy that came for backup during this event was quite polite. He's like, how are you doing? Well, not so well this evening. We had a little chat. The other officer, not at all, not remotely even apologetic.
And maybe in the interest of moving on, you and I can talk afterwards and catch up on this. So that, the point that I don't want lost though is that we know, and we're trying to work very hard on that, every contact a police officer has with somebody in the community has an impact on that person. We don't deal with a huge segment of the community all the time. You know, there are lots of people who live in Boulder that never have contact with the police. But oftentimes that one contact is that person's only perception of our organization, and how that interaction goes directly translates to what level of trust that person has on our organization in the community. And is that something we are continually working on? Always. Because we know we can win or lose trust on each individual contact we have in the community. So we can talk afterwards.
So my question, just based off of that, is if a citizen's having a negative interaction like was described here, or even in my situation a couple years ago, what recourse do citizens have right now in a stop like that? If it doesn't go to a criminal case where you have a defense attorney, who can I go to with Longmont PD or Boulder PD to you know, even if I feel comfortable enough to reach out? Who can I come to?
Let me, I'll go first real quickly. Certainly you can come to us. And we have an office that deals with just those complaints specifically, and that person reports to me. The other thing that we've put in place in Longmont, and Marta helped us put it together, was this process called SOMAs, which means us versus them. And what we've designed are various, like St. John's Church, the R Center, Community Relations, El Comite, where people can go and file a complaint. They don't have to go to the police department. And people who work in those agencies can be that person's advocate. And so we know that when you walk into a police department, that's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. And when you walk into a police department, you want to make a complaint against somebody, that's really hard to do. So understanding and acknowledging that we've set up other agencies for people so that they can serve as their advocates, so that's an easier process and we're still accessible.
So, and Ian and Marta, I mean, is that pretty accurate about someone, if they have a concern, they can come to you instead of coming directly to the police?
Right, and that's what we have had. People come because the trust level in our organization is there. So they come and show the concern of what happened to them, whatever, who lost or whatever, you know, and we tell them about this group that belongs to. That's what it is. Not necessarily they got cited or ticket. It's not gonna remove the ticket, but it's gonna help them to understand, and that officer is going to hear how that person personally felt and what the impact was. So it's there for us to use, and we're trying to get it, you know, ongoing for it to happen. That's something that's workable, you know.
May I just, quick?
We've really touched a nerve here. Here, let's actually move on to another question, because we've spent about 20 minutes on this one. We need to revisit. Al, go ahead.
Mine's kind of a broad overview of things, I guess, and I'm kind of nervous to speak in front of a lot of people, but anyway, there must be different areas of trust issues with the police or law enforcement. From my perspective, we talked about law enforcement says that the community ought to be more involved, but I believe it's the police that should be more involved. There are laws out there, and you need to enforce the laws. But from my perspective, from where I'm coming from, is I see a little bit of too much of catch and release. The police department catches them and somebody else releases them. And I don't see a lot of the right amount of sentencing for some people. I have a very great close friend of mine. His wife was killed a few years back in Longmont by a person, a 19-year-old, and the guy got 3 years. And after it's all said and done, he got way less than that. And my friend was there every 6 months trying to convince him to keep him in prison, but that didn't happen. But, you know, he could lose his wife. And we have people that go to prison, and for some reason we pay more to keep somebody in prison than a family of 4 that has to survive. And the prisoner gets all these benefits, health benefits, everything else. But if a party ends up a victim of a crime and he's lame or whatever for the rest of his life, there's no benefits for that person. But in regard to more community stuff, I think we have more than enough community stuff out there already. We have community justice, where we pay the police department, we pay the district attorney and all the other sheriff departments and stuff. Then Longmont pays $63,000 a year, or they did this year, to give to community justice. And then we have a whole bunch of people that are on community service. And all that does is put that onto somebody else that puts the responsibility on somebody else. For example, I volunteered a lot of places, and you get people that have to do community service. And it seems to me like they get to pick their own places where they want to go work. I don't see how that's going to change their attitude about anything, but anyway, when they get there, let's say, for example, it was community food chair that used to be in Niwot. There was a lady assigned to making sure these people showed up at their scheduled time. They were there for the amount of time. Then we got to find somebody to go work with them to make sure that they're going to do some work that might mean community service. So all these other people are involved in watching over them. And a lot of them get done and they could care less. Another place I volunteer is at Restore. People come in and sign in. If now they give them some kind of a jacket to wear or identification. Before, they're slipping out. They come back and sign in. And if you ain't watching them, they weren't even there. And then you talk about mental health. Well, that's not society. That's not my job. And what I mean by that is community. Mr. Butler has direct communication with the city council. That's where it stems from. Like in Longmont, you don't even have a mental health anymore. At the community hospital, they used to have mental health. They don't anymore. Well, that's the city council and the leadership that starts working with that. When you talk about people and community getting involved, to me, these are people that are out working daily. They got kids, they got to take them to school. They got activities after school. When do they have time to be involved in community? When we hire people to be doing that. And I'm sorry, but illegal immigration is against the law. The country's law, the federal laws, and so forth. They're here committing crimes. You can bust me for little bitty things. You know, I went to court over one thing. I didn't need to be there at all. It got thrown out, but I had to be there.
What crimes are they committing? Putting food into your table? Is that a crime?
No, and plus,
Doing what?
breaking the immigration laws, it's a civil infraction. It's not even a crime, so it's a misconception too.
Well, so let's try to answer all those questions, at least the first 12. So, you know, the overarching question here, you know, I think that you're saying, your concern is that, you know, are we appropriately responding to the crimes that are being committed right now, and it's, you know, are our communities safer or less safe than they were a year ago, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago? So I'm going to depend on a couple people here, unless anyone's got a quick response from our panel here.
Don't forget the mental health part of that.
Yeah, well, and I'll try to address the mental health if someone else doesn't want to try to address that one. Mike, do you want to, as our, wearing two hats today.
Well, the one thing that I thought that I could add to that, and I think it also dovetails with the previous conversation we had, which is the use of the word discretion. Discretion is something that is in the system, and it's for a good reason. I think where we run into a problem is when discretion isn't used as it should be, or there may be a disagreement as to how the discretion was used. When it comes to sentencing, it is very much about discretion. Ultimately, it's the judge's discretion as to how the sentence should go. But really, I think the goal of a criminal justice system should be to make sure that those that are incarcerated for a very good reason, for public safety reasons, for example. But also, you're not over-incarcerating. You want to make sure that, and I think this is the case, many of the folks that come through really, the goal of community safety is better achieved through keeping them in the community and going through treatment programs so that it addresses the root of the issue, so that they don't come back again. That doesn't work for everybody. And those are the folks that will be, I think, if the judge uses his or her discretion, those are the folks that go away for a while in the Department of Corrections. I do think also that you hit on the point there that some folks don't know, which is that in our current system, if you're sentenced to, say, 10 years, and maybe 10 years would be an appropriate sentence, again, because of, I think, budgetary reasons and other reasons, 10 years only means 3.5 years or something to that effect. So if you're trying to incarcerate somebody for a long period of time for community safety reasons, and the sentence is 10 years, but really it's only 3.5 years, I think that there's a disconnect there. And that's one thing that you were getting at in your comments. So I don't know if I would really attempt to answer everything that you brought up, but that was the one part that it hit a note with me.
Well, I have just one question. Is there a state law or a federal law that says that prisoners have to be prisoned in this state or in this country?
That inmates should be imprisoned in the United States?
Yep.
Well, I mean, generally, if you're prosecuting someone under the Colorado state law, then you're going to imprison them in the state of Colorado.
But is there a law that says you have to? Why can't we imprison them in another country where it's cheaper? Because that's the biggest problem we got is the cost. So why can't they be? I mean, if you cut off the health benefits and you cut off all the visitation and stuff, I bet you somebody's going to straighten up a little quicker.
Well, I think certainly I'm not an expert on how much it costs to incarcerate someone in another country, but I do know what the costs are here in Colorado. It's about $32,000 a year.
Yeah.
Those costs are going to be
prisons.
Hmm?
It's for-profit prisons.
Those costs are going to be
You got
pretty
a
high.
lot of people
regardless.
prisoners.
Hmm?
We have plenty.
Prison industrial complex.
Exactly.
You
You don't think there's enough?
So Chief Butler's also got a response.
So real quickly for everybody, when I was making my comments about community involvement, I wasn't saying the community ought to get involved in terms of dealing and responding to crimes. As you heard me say, 20% of the calls we go on have a crime attached to it. The other 80% don't. All I'm saying is a lot of things that we end up going on need a neighbor more than need a cop.
Yeah, stop calling.
And so that's all I'm saying, is the ones that don't have a crime attached to them, can we do a better job in terms of striking that balance between what the community does and what the police do? That's all I'm saying. I agree with Mr. Shepner in terms of saying we should be the ones that go to the crimes. And we should be the ones that's what we get paid for. Secondly, mental health. Pervasive issue in any community in this country, maybe in the world. And there's been a lot of de-budgeting around mental health over the last number of years in this state. But there has been a number of things that have happened recently in terms of the enhancement of public funding so that we can address mental health. And one of the things that Longmont and Boulder are doing more than ever is we got a grant, we hired mental health professionals who actually ride along and come out on our calls as police officers and assist us in these calls that have with people who are struggling with mental illness. These are not difficult calls, and if you look at a lot of police shootings across the country, a lot of them involve people who are struggling with mental illness. Just go to Albuquerque as an example. And so police departments are really well trained to deal with issues involving mental health, but now we've gotten this extra assistance from mental health professionals that help us along those lines. The other thing I will say is that that's just a pervasive issue that involves families, neighborhoods, public funding, and it's something that actually in Longmont we're going to galvanize around and try to figure out how we can have a different kind of approach, because public funding will only go so far, period. The illegal immigration or undocumented people, we've done some data collection in Longmont. And by the way, our population is around 30% Latino, and we have literally thousands of people who are monolingual, and most likely many of them are undocumented. But what we found is that less than 10% of the crime we have are committed by people who are undocumented. 90% of the crime are committed by people who are United States citizens. And so, yeah, I don't think we should make a case to deport United States citizens. because they commit the majority of the crimes either. And maybe I'm a little tongue-in-cheek with that, but I just want to make it clear that the data shows that the undocumented people are not as involved in crime as perhaps we might want to think. So, in my mind, Mr. Shetler, the data gets in the way of a good story.
All right, moving on to the next question. We'll keep going down the table. Darren.
All right. So I think it's interesting that we're here in a room full of almost all privileged white folk, most of us. And the reason that these discussions, I think, are even happening is because across the country and in Denver and even in Boulder, people started coming out, shutting down the streets, saying, you know, hands up, don't shoot. We want justice. We watched Darren Wilson walk away unindicted, and it's very frustrating. And I'd sure like to see some of this conversation come back to that. I'm sitting next to Kurt, and Kurt came to a talk that we put on recently, and Chief Testa, and they could only be there for an hour, but many people only get to have a voice and vent their frustration on the streets. And we had one of those events here in Boulder, many of them in fact, and when there was an arrest, it was a black person, even though it was a march against arresting black people. And I want to share that I've been working with that group, that community, and I, as a privileged white person, have been annoying some of them with stuff that I don't even know is going on, that I have these privileges, and it's frustrating for them. And it's frustrating for me to learn them, and I look at that and then I say, okay, this issue that we were marching against of a 5 times arrest rate that was discovered by USA Today for African Americans in Boulder, I can understand a little more just from my experiences of how you don't even know that's happening. I didn't know that's happening. I doubt that Mr. Johnson here knew that that was happening. But now that we know it's happening, what are we going to do about it? And we're all sitting here, Mr. Butler and Mr. Johnson, and hearing Stan. All this sounds so great. Like if I didn't know what was happening to people who are on the other end of a beating or an arrest, you would think it's all perfect. But I have my own friend who came here on homeless issues, come to the Boulder Library, and he got arrested. He got arrested for trespassing in the library as he was exiting. The only thing that stuck, and I really wish Stan had been around because he did get a jury trial, and the only thing that stuck was what he pled guilty for, resisting what he considered an unlawful arrest. Everything else was dropped. So I appreciate that there was a jury that dropped the charges, but I don't appreciate that they made our police force and our library staff turn someone who was a social justice person here to talk about rights into a criminal. And I think we need a lighter touch. And I think I'm grateful Mr. Johnson's here. I'm grateful Nikhil is here from the Human Relations Commission. We'll be addressing them this week. But I'd like to hear, I've talked a long time, it's so easy to do when you get fired up on these issues. But from folks who know that, you know, this is happening, and it's, how do we turn that around? I think you guys walking the community is huge.
Dan, do you have a
Yeah, I
response?
really have to address what you're saying, okay?
Thank you.
And first of all, you know, I have a history too. When I got to Longmont, Colorado, I was forced to live on the east side of the city. When I got to Longmont, Colorado, I couldn't belong to a damn private club, and I was the first to break that color barrier. And through El Comité and myself, I became the first elected official at large, city council of the city of Longmont. It was a tough road to go, and it's first in its history to be elected as the mayor pro tem. But okay, why am I bringing that up? More and more, what I hear what you're talking about, more and more what I see what Chief Butler's been doing. We're down there, and you can't talk the talk till you walk the walk. He's walking the walk, and we've talked to hundreds of people, hundreds, mainly nearly 100% minorities. Say, how do you think about our cops? Did anybody do wrong to you? Did you have trouble with the police officers? How do you feel this? Then you really, really get a sense of what's happening. Not just maybe some incident occurred in Boulder, Colorado. And not only that, what's important about what he's doing, and I've been privileged to accompany him, is the fact that you build trust right down there in the neighborhoods. Hundreds of people we're talking to. Every Sunday he calls me up. I mean, you know, I need a Sunday off. No, he calls me up and says, Dan, let's go walk the walk. And so what I guess I'm saying is that what I've really found after talking to hundreds of people over almost a year is that listening to them, and we've asked them, there's been some come to know me, I spent 4 years in Islam or whatever it was, abused. Others saying, yeah, I've got a ticket. Have you had trouble with the police? Yeah, I did, but it was my fault. But the point I'm saying is if we really want to affect change, if we really, really want to see what's going on in our community, go down and walk in the hood. Go down and walk in the hood, and hopefully someone from the police or someone like him will walk with you. Listen to what the people are saying. I could write you story after story what's coming back. And that's why we're hearing from Arizona, from South Africa, from Mexico, from Illinois, from Texas. Wow, what this man is doing is what should be done. And it's not easy. I mean, it isn't easy for you, I'm sure. You know, you're spending all your weekends talking to people.
Actually, I enjoy the heck out of it.
Well, yeah, but I guess
it's one of the more enjoyable parts of my job.
I guess what I'm getting at is I've been vocal about this, but I can't stress enough the importance of that. By the way, Chief Tester's into that now, as you know.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, but at any rate, you know, I hear what you're saying, but a lot of what comes back and identify with you trying to help these people by talking with them, but sometime come down with me in the hood.
Well, I think there's an assumption that I'm not doing that here in Boulder.
Okay, well, my fault, and maybe I'm wrong, because you may be doing just that.
Right.
But I haven't seen.
But I can learn. I'm not saying that just
I went
because
out
I'm
this,
just...
a Saturday ago to 12 individual, highly populated Latino communities in the city of Boulder.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've been to them all.
Not all of them, no.
Okay.
So
But anyway, I didn't mean to carry
No, I mean, so my question, and this is where we have a challenge, is that some of this is, we can't legislate everything, right? Bo, you brought that up. We try, apparently, but you know, we can't legislate better community relations every day. And so the question is what works on the state level, the local level, the national level, and part of that is hopefully coming out of this conversation. You know, I guess my question for you, Darren, is you know, one of the struggles I think in Boulder City specifically is the relationship between the community, law enforcement, and the homeless population. It's a little more unique and different than it is in Longmont or it looks in other places. And so, you know, I'm wondering, you know, Deputy, if you have any thoughts on how to better develop those relationships so those kinds of conflicts don't come up again.
Yeah, Darren and I were talking before this started too about some things we're working on, but we know that homelessness is an issue in Boulder. Policing the homeless is a challenge, and trying to find the right services that may have nothing to do with the police department to help the homeless population is also a challenge. You know, in Boulder we have a very disparate network of people who all want to help, but they don't communicate with each other. Mm-hmm. And there are different organizations that are all trying to fill the same need, and or maybe where there are other needs that are going unmet. And trying to balance all of that, you know, Darren and I were talking about our approach to policing the homeless is trying to dedicate officers to do nothing but work with the homeless community. You know, we have some officers, somebody mentioned the officers on the Pearl Street Mall. They deal with the homeless population on a regular basis, and they know them. They know what their individual issues are. So we're trying to work with the court system on what's the best outcome for those people, whether they're eligible for VA benefits that might benefit them and help them get off the street, whether they have mental health issues and we need to use the EDGE program, which is part of that mental health outreach that we're working on to better intervene in their life, whether they have substance abuse issues, and those are areas where we need to target our abilities to find them help, and trying to get a core network of officers that deal primarily with our homeless population and better serve them as a community. And you know, I guess what we've looked at is other experiences in other communities where unfortunately it's taken the police to be the lead to coordinate that effort, to bring those groups together and find the right services for the right people, because we're the ones that have day-to-day contact with that community, and how best do we integrate that and make it work. And it's something we're working on this spring. There's a couple officers that are working on it hard and that are trying to learn from other agencies that have very successful programs, that have reduced recidivism rates, that have helped transition people out of homelessness. And it's something we're working towards, but it's going to be a long road.
I'm going to keep moving down the table.
I want to have one quick rebuttal and we can move on. But I know through walking the homeless areas where folks congregate and hang out, I know that there are certain officers that homeless folks will run when they see them coming. And there are others who I've been told, yeah, she arrested me, but she's one of my best friends. I protect her no matter what. So when we know that there are some that have a reputation for scaring the hell out of people and there's a reason for it, I'd like, and I'll follow up with you offline, what we can do to get them out of that area. And I don't know who they should interact with because I think they have no social skills, but they shouldn't be going against our at-risk community.
But remember too that peace officers are human beings.
Yeah.
And you know, there are. I guess what I would liken it to is making sure we get the right people on the right bus and in the right seat on the bus. And there are officers that we want to that are actually interested in helping the homeless community, and they're probably the officers that you're referring to that have built relationships. Can we do better at getting other members of our organization to build better relationships in the community? Absolutely.
I'm going to keep moving down the table here. We'll work our way around.
Thanks. This is probably for Chief Deputy Johnson, but whoever knows the history perhaps could take an answer. And thank you for serving. I understand how difficult it is to, with every contact, perhaps need to make a split-second decision. And also, thank you for engaging the community. It's important to do that. It's my understanding that there exists in Boulder a professional standards review board that has 12 people on it, 6 of whom are civilians, and that might be the place that these complaints are made to, though I don't know how it works. I don't know when it was created, so perhaps you could tell us some of the history and the reason for the creation of that, and also how it works, who's on it, who appoints the civilians, and how the community that's chosen to be here, or more broadly, could engage in that and how it works.
Sure. So that actually, Mike Butler played a role in creating that back in the early 90s.
Yes.
And that portion of the Professional Standards Review Panel is what it's called. That portion of the process reviews all of our serious allegations of misconduct. So they aren't really charged with taking complaints, but their role in the process is to review serious allegations and help make recommendations to the chief of police on whether the officer's conduct or behavior that's in question was appropriate or not. And there are, as you mentioned, there are 12 people appointed to that panel. 6 are from within the police department, 6 are community members. They are actually selected by the city manager or her designee. The last couple of selection processes, she sat in on those processes and actually selected those people to sit on the panel themselves. The seats usually turn over every 2 or 3 years, depending on the time that they've been on the panel and trying to keep some consistency on the panel. And that's a process that's open to anyone who's a Boulder resident. There are a few restrictions as far as that you actually live in the city of Boulder, you're a community member here, and you're interviewed by a group and selected by the city manager. And those postings, when there are opportunities to participate, are usually made available to the Daily Camera and usually run a story that says we're looking for new panel members. It's not an independent investigatory board. Their true goal is to review an investigation that's done by our professional standards supervisor and make sure that it was fair and accurate and complete, and then make a recommendation to the chief as to whether or not the allegation of misconduct should be sustained or unfounded or not sustained, or basically provide him with a community sounding board piece to the complaint process.
Yes, to follow up, is there any process for, you said it's only serious allegations that they review, and do you know where information could be found out about that, if it's online or anything?
About
The professional standards review panel in general, whether that's online, and whether there's any place to go for less than serious allegations.
well, we'll take all allegations of misconduct. It's just a matter of how serious they are as to what level of investigation they're given. So we have a professional standards supervisor. There is online, there's complaint information online. I'm not sure there's a lot of information about the review panel itself or who's on it. But there is, you can file a complaint with us in person, online. There's information on our website about how to do that. We've also taken complaints through the Human Relations Commission at time. When people aren't comfortable coming to the police department, that's some place that they've turned. That we've worked to bring that information back to us so that we can investigate it and try to make it right.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, we'll keep going around the table, so.
Hi, I just actually want to introduce myself to, I've met you. Very happy to see you again, and Chief, Butler, correct?
Yeah. Correct.
So, I facilitate a group here in Boulder focused on race relations and racial justice issues. We serve in many capacities, forums, education, more contemplative talks amongst people from different perspectives. And so mainly, as I said, I just want to introduce myself. I actually have to leave. I was very grateful to be informed of this, and certainly with regard to race, I do receive a lot of, just call it feedback.
I didn't hear you introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What's your name?
Who are you? Jen Watson, Boulder Coalition and Alliance on Race. So I look forward to working with you all. Chief Teska talked about a lot of goals and plans for the department, and so, you know, I'm here to say I will be in touch. And I would love to sit down with you, Chief Butler, and talk about, you know, just, it sounds like you've developed a lot of systems, and people want to know, and, you know, our goal is not just to say, hey, bad cop. Our goal, as you're talking about, is to listen to you guys. Also, there's some people in the group who really want to listen to you and see how we can work with you to be allies. But of course, with the hope that, you know, we can express things to you too. So I'm gonna, I was actually just gonna say, I have my cards here, and I'll, so I'd like to leave one, give one to you, and also for you, I didn't get to give you one last time that I saw.
Did you get one of mine last time?
I did, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll take one.
So thank you so much. I'm really glad to hear this. And there's a lot of people in my group, many, over 100 people, who are going to be very happy to hear, I think, about the efforts being made and the fact that you all are sitting here today saying that you want to listen. And I will express that in an email. So thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. So we're going to keep moving around the table, and then we'll go to the periphery, and we've got about 20 minutes left, and so if you can ask your question, then if you can direct it to one of our panelists, that's always better. So.
Could I follow up with Deputy Johnson on the review panel? 3 questions. Are there complaints that lie outside the reach of the commission, and if so, what's the definition of what's the jurisdiction or review or scope? How many complaints are filed in a given year, and how many are sustained?
I couldn't tell, well, let me answer backwards for you if I can. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head right now how many total complaints we received during a year, but that is data that we do collect. And I'll give you my card if you want to follow up with me. And again, I also couldn't tell you how many are sustained and how many are not, just because I don't know off the top of my head. But we can look at 2014 as an example, and I can tell you. With regards to the levels of complaints and what the Professional Standards Review Panel sees and what they don't, typically that depends on what type of misconduct is being alleged. So typically, any use of force case would be a allegation of serious misconduct that they would see. Serious policy violations would fall under that and would be classified in a way that they would see it. Cases of what maybe might be a rudeness complaint might not rise to that level and would be investigated, would still be investigated, but would not be investigated as a allegation of serious misconduct. It might be an allegation of lesser misconduct.
And therefore would not go before this.
Correct, correct. So basically the chief decides.
That's my question. Who's the gatekeeper?
The chief is.
Does he have, is there written criteria or text that we could?
There are some, in our policies, yeah.
Thank you.
Moving down the table, questions?
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my name is Nikhil. I'm with the City of Boulder Human Relations Commission. And just a comment I had on the discussion, something that's maybe not, I did miss the initial 20 minutes, but something that hasn't come up yet is what I'm trying to do with the commission is, you know, this is about community relations. It's not just community and police. So what Chief Butler had said about what was the statistic about the number of calls you get?
80% don't have a crime.
Mm-hmm. And so in that case, we have to look at how is police contact initiated? That's a component of this also, and it's initiated by people in the community. It's not just police out on patrol seeing something. And when you have, say in Boulder, kind of a homogenous community, and then you don't just have the Latino neighborhood. And how do police deal with people in the Latino neighborhood or this neighborhood? What about when you have mixing and you have Latino people going out? Everyone shops in the same community, and you want people to enjoy public spaces in the same community. So what is the relationship between citizens in that community? Because what that can lead to is, it isn't just police profiling someone and stopping them. It might be people in your own community looking at citizens and members of that community and saying they look suspicious, and they then call the police, and they go out in one of those calls that is like, there's nothing, this is one of those 80% calls. And so how can we get to the citizenship in the community, to better relations between minority populations and the majority populations, so that those calls don't happen? Because what happens is people get police contact, they have a question, why are the police talking to me about this? But they don't know, well, it's also, you feel suspicious about the community. Who thought I was suspicious? And that's an element of it too, is as citizens we need to look at how inclusive and welcoming is the community of people who don't look like us, who have different jobs and different income than us, and how do we treat fellow citizens, and when do we call police, and how do we decide who is suspicious and who is not? And that's a whole community issue, and I think that's what you were getting at when you talked about the community needs to be involved. Is it's not just about police, how police treat people. Police contact is initiated by how fellow citizens treat each other and when they think they need to call the police. And those judgments can, we need to get at the community and find ways of making it more inclusive, welcoming, and understand that people who look differently, we all belong to the same community. And I think that can lessen initiations of police contact that often lead to misunderstandings, antagonistic relationships between citizenship and police. So that's
yeah, Chief Butler, do you have a?
Yeah, real quickly. That is an issue, and we acknowledge that. But I also think those are resolvable, and I think it's an over time kind of resolution. And one of the roles that we're taking on in public safety in Longmont, because I don't see leadership anymore as much as I see it differently. I see leadership more as being with intention, convening, valuing relationships, and presenting choices. I see leadership moving forward in those venues. And what I think we can do in public safety or government is we can begin to convene, in fact we have, groups of people who are different than each other, and to have the kind of conversations that connect and build relationships and give people that sense of belonging. And the point is belonging, and I can go on and on and on about what that could do to a community, but the person they're calling on belongs to that community. The person who's calling belongs to that community. This is going to happen one conversation, one room, one gathering at a time. And I think government can play a role, frankly, in that kind of convening in terms of pulling people together. We have, and we've seen great success from that. In fact, we're going to have another meeting here in the spring, around 300 to 350 people of all different kinds of folks, and in Longmont. And that's the purpose is, the point of that is to get that sense of belonging into that room so that people all feel like they're connected and related to each other. I don't think it's any more difficult than that, but I also don't think it's always, it's a long-term effort as well.
All right, moving away from the table now, Martha, do you have a quick response to this?
Yeah, what I wanted to explain is, as a comité, as an organization, we've done a lot of learning sessions to our community. You know what Eagle Cycle is about, Know Your Rights is about, you know, different things in the community. We have had, and hopefully get them back again, but is the police officers, I call them the new kids on the block. When they're new, yeah, they come to our office.
You're going to get them.
Right on. You know, and I'm going to you on
I know you will.
that they come to our office, though they know the history of what happened back in 1980. So what we try to do is give them, the new officers, an orientation as to what we're about. You're out there not to do social service. That's what we are about. So we have them to take brochures and give them to the people whenever they find out something, domestic violence, child abuse, whatnot, to come into our office so we can help them. So we kind of help the officers to know what we are all about. So when they come to a situation, it's like I get calls at home, you know, middle of the night, and they don't matter, to let them know that they also can utilize us. Send the people over our way. We'll do that part. You don't have to do it. And there, you know, I don't know if there are organizations, groups that exist. I know Centro Amistad, whatever, that have groups also so that it can refer them so they can be that voice or they help them. So it alleviates the pressure of the officers where they don't know whatever. And that's what we do. Give them an orientation. We will tell them this is what we're trying to build trust and relationship between the community and the law enforcement as to what happened. So they, you know, it's really good for them, and they can call us for translation, interpretation, or whatever case need. We help to help diffuse the situation and the problem.
So what I'm going to do, because we've got about, I'm going to do a quick time check. We've got about 10 minutes and about 4 questions, and Melissa, Zach, and Chief Zach is able to join us here for the last couple minutes. I'm going to let, if you have any input that you want to add to the 2 minutes or so, and then I think as questions come up, we'll give you an opportunity to answer those.
I apologize for my tardiness. I thought the event started over, so forgive me for arriving just before 4 o'clock. I'm the chief at CU, and we provide services for the students and the faculty and staff that live on campus, and we occasionally work with Boulder PD on various issues throughout the Hill. I'm glad to be a part of this dialogue today, and having seen what's happened across the nation, and having lived in LAPD and in LA World for 21 years, I really understand and get the impact that our communities have in law enforcement, and that in Los Angeles, the old days of putting your hand up to the community member and not listening to them are long gone in LA, and I've had lessons learned from what happens when we don't work with the community. So I'm here to entertain any questions you may have about how CU interacts with our student populations and our minority populations, but again, thank you for welcoming me.
Thanks for coming. So we're going to go down 3 questions along the wall here.
So I was wondering, I mean, I think that the idea of community involvement is really great. Is there something that as nonprofits we could do better to help the police do their job better, because I think, certainly from the disability community, because I'm on the board of the ACL, we have talked a lot about how do we get police officers to interact with individuals with disabilities better, but I think all of us need to kind of think about how does our organization make your job a little better. So do you guys have some ideas about what might help you to interact better with the community?
Melissa, you're due, take it.
All right. So if I understand your question right, is with the nonprofits and working with people with disabilities, whether it's a mental
Well, I mean,
health.
just in general, too. How does the nonprofit community fold into your community outreach in a better way? Because so far, I don't see us being very engaged yet, but I think we should and possibly could be more.
All right, so what I see in terms of my interactions with the community because of the uniform that I wear is people automatically look at me as I'm different from them. When you work with a disability community or any nonprofits, the voice that you carry for me is tremendous in terms of they'll trust you because you're providing a service to them, and they'll dialogue with you and they'll say different things to you, but not necessarily say those same things to me by virtue of what I have on my chest. So when you're having conversations with the community and there is a distrust of the police, or there is, well, why did the police officer do this, that, or the other? It's one thing if I explain the traffic stop, but it's another thing if you as a representative and leader in your community will say, well, this is how I understand what happens when cops stop you. But so many times I could try to explain why we do the things that we do, and I'm distrusted just because of what I do for a living and because of what I wear. In Los Angeles, I used to oversee a very large parade, predominantly of African Americans, and my first week in the division, I said to my staff, I said, where are the gang interventionists in this parade route? And they said, well, Captain, we don't ever involve gang interventionists in helping us reduce the violence of this particular parade. And so we invited him to a meeting, and I said to the group, I said, because of the color of my skin and because of what I wear for a living, what I do for a living, there's places I can't go in this city because of what I do. So I asked them, I said, I need your help. I need your help providing a safe event for the Kingdom Day Parade. And as they were leaving the station, one of them said, this is the first time I've ever been into a police station through the front door. Which told me that we had a lot of work to do in repairing our relationships with some of our community leaders and selling that message. So I hope that helps you in terms of how our nonprofits can work better and help us in the law enforcement.
And I want to say real quickly, one of the things you can do for us is we have in-service training for officers. Your area is an area of special expertise that we know general things about. And so if you would like to come in and offer some trainings for our people in terms of building our awareness and consciousness around what you're working with, that would be very helpful.
All right, thank you. Last two questions, 5 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Ron Skook. I've lived in Boulder for about 28 years or nearby. And I just have to comment that I feel cynical and skeptical that police can in any way resolve systemic problems that come down through legislators. I mean, the campaign ban or homeless ordinances or ordinances that criminalize homelessness, I mean, that is something that to me, plainly obviously, is a way for legislators to pass the buck, to say, let's scapegoat these people. We're not responsible for solving these serious issues of poverty in our social environment. And to have any expectation that police are going to be fulfilling that role is ridiculous. So I think for people who, have trouble with how the police are behaving, the place to start really is with our local legislators and also with our state legislators and so on. And I just have to make one other comment. I'm really disappointed in the way people with mental health issues are treated in this community. And a perfect emblematic example came up last week where the guy, Luke Crisco, who obviously has mental health issues, was sentenced to 6 years incarceration into prison. And, going into his case, and I wish Sam Garnett was here to comment on it, it was clear. I mean, people seem to understand that here's a guy with mental problems. And yes, his actions were offensive, but there has to be another, I mean, this is the absolute end. I mean, if this guy isn't getting helped, instead he's being put into prison, which is, to me, tantamount to torture, to do that to somebody who clearly needs mental health, or mental help assistance, and not the assistance of being incarcerated. So I know I'm just going on a bit, but that's my rant. Thanks.
So, I mean, and so I'll just respond briefly since you brought up lawmakers. I know that, you know, a lot of those ordinances are passed at the local level. We don't have any city council members here, and to a certain extent, you're right. We can't pass the buck onto to the people who are enforcing the laws when we write the laws. And, you know, I'm meeting with a group of people who are working on a homeless bill of rights next week, and I'm interested in what they have to say about these kinds of things, because this is a trickle down effect. And the interaction between mental health and incarceration is you know, connected in a way that it shouldn't be. I mean, the one thing that we talk about at the legislature now is we need to stop criminalizing things, and one of the rebuttals we hear is, well, we can provide more people with more services if we put them through the criminal justice system, which is a sad and unfortunate response to the way that things have happened. And so we have to change the way that we're thinking about things. I don't know.
Real quickly.
Yeah.
And I want to reiterate a point I said before. And I think the people in the system are mean well, and the professionals in the system mean well. I don't run across many who don't. But until our communities and society stop saying it's the system's responsibility to deal with it, we're going to continue to deal with it that way. And so what we've done along with one more thing is we've galvanized, we have like 320 private sector LSCWs, MSWs, psychologists, psychiatrists. We're going to pull all them together and see what resource they can bring to the issues of people struggling with mental illness. That is an untapped resource in any community. And it's something I think we can make a lot of headway on. Because I've talked to a number of my friends, and they're willing to jump on and do pro bono work. So it's just something else we need to think about. And I think we need to get beyond thinking about professionals in the system trying to fix these social issues.
So last question, so better be a good one now. Leslie's been very patient, so I'll let you cue us up with the last question.
As a person of color, I'm interested in what kind of training you all receive. It's primarily for the public safety officers here. Especially for my community, the Asian community is underrepresented both within the larger community as well as within the underrepresented community. The number of daily offenses that we receive, while seemingly, you know, minor, result in oftentimes fairly popular stereotypes being used in daily occurrences with my community. Some very specific instances being, and this is not to point a finger, and this is not to, you know, say you need to fix this, but rather what I'm looking at prevention. I don't want to complain to somebody. I want to know what we're doing before we even get to the stop. You know, I mean, specifically a couple instances of traffic incidents, especially with Asian women, where the officer automatically assumes that because she's an Asian woman, she's a terrible driver and has, very simply, given her the ticket, regardless. And so, I'd like to hear from the three of you, what kind of training do you receive to help combat that? Obviously, there are going to be people who will ignore it. You know, I mean, there are those people out there. But I'd like to know, how are you trying to educate and humanize people who, especially even within the minority community, are sometimes ignored?
So let's start with Chief Zach, Deputy General Chief.
In terms of professionalizing Colorado police officers, having come from Los Angeles and with a very, very robust post department, state post, we used to have to get 24 hours of continuing professional training every single year. Some of that training did include cultural diversity. You get training in the academy on cultural diversity, sensitivity, racial profiling, what it is and what it isn't, and then you also get regular updates in training. Now, I will tell you that when we go to hire and recruit our officers, a lot of times in the state of Colorado, we have a very difficult time recruiting our minority populations. And as a chief, and as a female chief, I have to ask the question, why is it that more of our minority communities are not choosing to seek a profession in law enforcement? I will also tell you that Mike Butler over there, he has 40 years of policing experience.
Not quite, 36.
30, well, round up, 40 years of policing experience. And I think to get a pension, he has to work 40 years. And I'll tell you that what we pay our officers and how we recruit and retain our officers is very important. And if you want a better officer, you need to start demanding more education from our officers. And I will tell you that I am a firm believer in education for our police officers at an entry-level position. I think that an officer with a BA or an AA has a much better perspective on how to interact with people. If they're in higher ed, they have a lot of diversity. They're exposed to a lot of diverse cultures, diverse people, diverse backgrounds, and I think that makes them a better human being and a better officer as they can move forward.
Yeah, just to reiterate, she covered that our post, which is our Police Officer Standards and Training Board, it's a state-run board, dictates what minimum levels of training officers have to get. And there is certainly a cultural diversity piece that's a part of the basic academy every officer gets before we hire them. But what's more important is the ongoing department-specific training and I know Mike does it, and I'm sure CU does it as well, but we typically annually have some form of diversity training that occurs in our organization. It may not be specific to a specific culture or specific race, but at other times it is. And so we are cognizant of that. We also try to hire a workforce that is somewhat reflective of our community, which, as Melissa pointed out, can be a challenge for us. Despite our ability or our desires to recruit and retain people who help us better reflect the community, it's a challenge, but it's one that we continue to work on. You know, in some ways we exceed what our community looks like in our organization. In other areas, we don't. But it is an ongoing effort that we're certainly committed to, because we do know that there are things specific to every culture that can impact a police officer's interaction with an individual, and the better we can prepare officers for some of those nuances and cultural differences can help us do our job better.
Yeah, I'm just going to be real quick. The hiring of a police officer is critically important for us. Critically important. It's their intellect, where their heart's at, where their soul's at, is so important for us in terms of what we hire, who we hire. Along with that, we do a significant amount of cultural competency training, and we bring people in who can help us with that, because we have multiple cultures in Longmont as well. And I agree with what these folks said as well. It's something, and then the other side of that is the culture of our organization, and the expectations are that we will build relationships, we will make connections, and they're not just law enforcement or police person, they're actually human to human connections, and we think that actually transcends quite a bit. And so anyway, for now.
So real quick, yeah, I think you all are right. A community that you're going through some struggle of being that reflection of and that's where kind of the issue is. There again, also the Department of Justice. In the Department of Justice, the CRO, Community Relations Office, a lot of times they have programs that they are able to build into the communities to help not only law enforcement, but the hospitals, the schools, and then the community as a whole. I think they're there, and we're not utilizing them. And I think they've got programs that they've had from Chicago, LA, whatever, not to help communities. That's what they're there for. And I think if we're talking or having some of those things accomplished, I think they should be utilized.
Well, so I'm going to wrap it up with that. I want to thank everyone for being here, and I want to especially, applaud Ian and Marta and Chief Butler and Dan Benavides and Deputy Johnson and as well as Chris Muich, and thank you, Chief Zach, for making it. I'm glad your staff is sort of doing some freshman hazing to you, telling you the wrong times about things. But just a quick round of applause for everybody that participated today. And my card is here. This is the start of a conversation. And some other folks have left their information up here. Feel free to mingle for a few minutes before they kick us out and arrest us.
Bad joke. It's a good way to end it.